This is the pre-lab video for the specific heat of a metal lab. Now the purpose on the front page, it is to calculate the change in water temperature and determine the specific heat of a metal using mass data and temperature data. That is what we're going to do. So we have the equipment generally laid out here. You're going to need the ring stand with the wire gauze. You're going to need a 400 milliliter beaker that you fill up 3/4 of the way full just with tap water. You want to put a couple boiling chips in there. You will need a thermometer, a styrofoam cup, and a striker to light the Bunsen burner. Now when you are doing this, you want to use the small test tube. Remember, we have two test tubes. We have a large one and a small one. You want to use the small one for this lab. And what you're going to do is get one of the metals that we give you, and you want to fill the small test tube about halfway. So you don't want to go above halfway. So this is about as high as you want to get, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And when you get this test tube, you want to connect it to the clamp and have the clamp all the way up to the top of the test tube. And again, I'll explain why in a minute. So you have this 400 milliliter beaker filled up 3/4 of the way with tap water. You just put that onto the ring stand, and you want to make sure it's not too high or low like we have been doing with the Bunsen burner. When you're using the test tube clamp, make sure you're using one that does not have any rubber on the piece here, because that will end up melting. And the other thing you want to do is make sure this thing is not twisting. What happens, sometimes these come loose and this will move. So what you want to do is make sure it's lined up and tighten that down, because that will make it a lot easier when you have to go and pour the metal into the styrofoam cup. So when you first come in, what you want to do is get this beaker filled up with water and get boiling chips in it and start heating it right away, because that's going to take a little while to heat up. So do that right away, and while that's heating, then you can pick out the metal. And what you're going to do, pay attention to the data on the back side. You're going to get the mass of the small test tube. You're going to add metal to it. You're going to get the mass. So what you could do is a little bit of subtraction to get the mass of the metal. You're going to get the mass of a styrofoam cup. You are going to fill the styrofoam cup with 50 milliliters of water, and then again you could do a little subtraction to get the mass of the water by itself. You are going to get the temperature of the boiling water. So when this is boiling, just hold the thermometer in there. It should be around 100 degrees Celsius. And you are going to get the initial temperature of the water in the cup. So that will probably be somewhere around 20 degrees Celsius, but you want to write down exactly what it is. While this is heating, you want to put the metal into the beaker, the test tube with the metal and into the beaker. Make sure the test tube, you don't want that touching the bottom of the beaker, so you might have to adjust this a little bit. It should be just above it. It should be pretty close. So for this one, I have to move it up a little bit. Now, when you're doing this, remember I said you do not want the mass of the metal or the metal filled up too high? See how that's all the way to the top of the water? That's actually telling me that I should add a little bit of water into this beaker. That's why you want to make sure you do not go over halfway filled for the test tube. So for this one, it would actually be better if we took a little bit of metal out. But what you're going to do is let this heat up. Now, if your Bunsen burner is on, what I would do is turn the Bunsen burner off while you're setting this up so you're not going to burn your hand. And then just turn it back on and let this keep heating. You do not want the Bunsen burner so high that the flame's coming up and over the side, because you don't want this to get hot on this side. We're going to have to touch that. So you want it really just hitting the bottom of the beaker. You let that sit in the boiling water for about 10 minutes or so. So then the metal is going to end up at the same initial temperature as the boiling water. And after that's heating for a while, what you want to do is transfer this metal into the styrofoam cup. And this is the part where you have to be careful. Your class may have like hot pads or something like that where you could use this. Not all classrooms have that. Grab a couple paper towels and kind of fold them over and hold it like that. Now, what I've actually done a lot of times is just hold it in my hand. It gets a little warm, but not too hot, as long as the Bunsen burner flame is not going too high. And if you're nervous about doing this, ask your teacher. They might be willing to help you. But what you can do is loosen this. It doesn't take much, just a little bit of a turn. And you want to pour this into the test tube that has the water in it. But you see how this is turning at this point? That's why I said to make sure this part is as tight as you can get it. So what you have to do is dump it into the cup. When you dump it into the cup, make sure the thermometer is not in there because you may break it. Now if you're doing this at this point and this part is loose, like this, and you can't actually turn it, what you might have to do is take your striker and tip it over like that. Just be careful because the metal is going to be hot probably from about here over, and the test tube is all going to be hot. So you don't want to touch any of those parts. And this is why I said if you need help, you might be able to ask your teacher. They might be willing to help you, but you might have to do it like that. So that's why I say make sure this is tight before you even start heating it. It'll make this part a lot easier. The temperature of the water in the cup is going to go up. You want to record the highest temperature reached. When you have the thermometer in here, do not touch it to the metal. Right? You want to gently swirl a cup just to spread the heat around, put the thermometer in there, but do not touch the metal. Record the highest temperature reached to 1 decimal point, and then you can fill out the temperature data on the paper. So you have the water in the cup after the metal was added. That is going to be the final temperature of both the metal, and it ends up being the final temperature of the water also. So you can figure out the delta T of the water in the cup, the delta T of the metal, and then you should be able to do all of the questions surrounded around the specific heat of a metal. But that is the main thing. I think the part that you really have to be careful with is when you are transferring the metal into the styrofoam cup. You want to make sure you don't burn your hands. When you're done, you're going to have metal in this cup along with water. What you want to do is decant off the water like we've done before. Make sure you do not lose any metal. The metal that's in here is going to be wet. We can't put that right back into the main jars. We will have plates with the names of the metals written on them. You want to pour them onto the plate, and we'll let them dry and take care of them at a later time.